Three men shared the same stage, but only one held the room with silence. As the attacks grew sharper, Barack Obama stayed still, waiting for the right moment. When it came, the entire hall stopped breathing. He taught them a lesson. And when he finished, even his critics couldn't look him in the eye. The city of Washington, D.C. had seen its share of powerful events, but this night felt different. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with the kind of tension that only comes when power, pride, and history share the same room. Inside the grand auditorium, thousands of eyes focused on the stage. The event was called Voices of Leadership, Past, Present, and Future. It was meant to be a discussion about the lessons of the past and the challenges ahead. But everyone knew deep down that it would become something more, a clash of eras, of personalities, and of pride. The stage was elegant and simple. 3 chairs faced the audience, each one waiting for a name that needed no introduction. On the far left sat Barack Obama, the former president, dressed in his usual understated style. His calm smile and unshakable composure drew quiet admiration from many in the room. Some whispered about how he still had that same presence, the kind that could fill a room even when he said nothing. In the middle sat Donald Trump, the current president, larger than life in both posture and energy. He leaned back, confident, his hands clasped on his lap, as if ready for battle before it even began. His very presence changed the air. You could feel a mix of excitement, curiosity, and nervousness ripple through the crowd. People knew that when Donald Trump was on stage, something would happen. And then, sitting beside him, was Barron Trump. Taller now, sharper in his features, and with a quiet focus that made many lean forward. It was rare to see him in a public discussion, and even rarer to see him seated next to 2 of the most famous men in American politics. He wasn't there as a child anymore. He was stepping into a role that the world hadn't seen him play before. The host, a respected journalist, stepped forward to the microphone, trying to ease the tension with a professional smile. "Tonight," he began, "we have the honor of hearing from 3 generations of leadership, the past, the present, and the future of American politics." A polite round of applause followed, but even that applause felt heavy, like people were clapping while holding their breath. The host continued, introducing each speaker one by one, though the audience hardly needed an introduction. The spotlight lingered briefly on Obama, then on Trump, and finally on Barron, the young face who seemed both nervous and ready at once. The topic was simple. What defines real leadership in America today? But in a room like this, simplicity was impossible. When the applause faded, Obama was the first to speak. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and began in that calm, measured tone that once carried across continents. "Leadership," he said, "is not about being the loudest in the room. It's about being the clearest. It's about making people believe not in you, but in themselves." The room was silent as he continued. His words had that quiet rhythm he was known for, gentle but firm, reflective but commanding. He talked about the struggles of division, about how America could not afford to let differences tear it apart. He spoke of unity, humility, and listening. Power, Obama said, is a tool, but without wisdom it becomes a weapon. And wisdom doesn't shout, it listens first. People nodded. Some smiled. Others leaned forward, captivated. It felt like the calm before a storm everyone knew was coming, but no one could predict. Obama ended his speech with grace, thanking the host and gesturing toward Trump with a polite nod. "Every leader brings something different," he said. "I'm sure President Trump has his own view." And with that, he sat down. The moment his seat touched the chair, the tone of the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a murmur, a movement, a sense that something sharp was about to follow. Trump adjusted his microphone. His eyes glimmered with the confidence of a man who never backed away from confrontation. He smiled, the kind of smile that said he was ready to strike, and said, "Well, that was a nice speech. But we all know speeches don't fix problems." A ripple of laughter passed through the audience, unsure whether to cheer or stay silent. Obama smiled faintly, not rising to the bait, while Barron glanced sideways at his father, his expression unreadable. Trump continued, "When people talk about leadership, they like to use big words, humility, unity, cooperation. But you can't run a country on feelings. You run it on results." The crowd murmured again. It was beginning. The polite introduction had turned into a quiet duel and everyone could feel it. Somewhere in the audience, cameras zoomed closer. The host shifted nervously. It wasn't supposed to go this way, but with these three on stage, maybe it always would. Barron sat still, hands folded, watching everything. He didn't say a word, but you could see something in his eyes, something thoughtful, maybe even strategic. He wasn't just watching his father or Obama. He was studying the entire moment, every pause, every glance, every reaction from the crowd. He was learning how power moved in a room, and as the lights reflected across the polished stage, one truth became clear to everyone watching. This wouldn't be just another discussion. It was going to be a showdown between experience, dominance, and a young voice waiting for its turn to speak. No one yet knew how far it would go. No one knew that before the night ended, the quiet young man in the third chair would say something that would stop Barack Obama in his tracks and shake the entire room. But for now, all eyes turned to Trump, because the storm had only just begun. Donald Trump leaned slightly toward the microphone, his expression confident and sharp. The quiet hum of the room seemed to fade as soon as he opened his mouth. He didn't need to raise his voice. His tone alone pulled attention, and his first words made it clear that he wasn't here to trade compliments. "Well," Trump began, his voice carrying that familiar mix of humor and defiance. "That was a nice speech. Calm, thoughtful, and very presidential. But speeches don't build jobs, they don't stop wars, and they don't pay bills." A few scattered chuckles came from the crowd. Others stayed completely still, knowing where this could be heading. Obama kept a polite smile, though his eyes watched carefully. Trump went on, "You talk about leadership, Barack, but the truth is leadership is about results, not rehearsed words. People didn't elect me because I sounded nice. They elected me because I did things." The crowd murmured again, a few claps echoing in the back rows. The tension began to tighten like a rope. Trump thrived in that feeling, the push and pull of approval and outrage. He paused for a moment, letting the silence build, then leaned forward with that familiar grin. "Let's talk about truth," he said, "because truth matters in leadership. And I've got to be honest. There are still questions about your truth, Barack. Big questions." The air in the room changed. Reporters sat straighter. Cameras zoomed in. Trump smiled wider, sensing he had everyone's attention. "You remember the birth certificate issue?" he said. "Of course everyone remembers. I said it back then and I'll say it again. Something didn't add up. The paper looked fake, and I still think it was fake." The crowd reacted instantly, a wave of shocked gasps mixed with nervous laughter. Obama didn't move. He sat perfectly still, hands resting on his knees. Trump raised a finger. "And you know what? I'm still willing to prove it. I'll give $5 million, yes, $5 million, to any charity of your choice if you release your full college applications and passport records. Let's see what's really there." The host tried to step in, but Trump's voice overpowered the attempt. $5 million, he repeated, his tone rising. "That's a real deal right here, right now." The moment felt unreal. People whispered in disbelief. Others clapped half-heartedly, unsure if they were supposed to. The tension was alive, thick enough to feel Trump wasn't done. He adjusted his tie and went on. "You talk about working hard, Barack, about serving the people. But maybe you should have spent less time on the golf course and more time in the office. Over 250 rounds of golf in 1 year. Can you imagine that? 250! I know pro golfers who don't play that much." Some laughter broke out, louder this time, mostly from one side of the hall. Trump smiled, satisfied with the reaction. "And while you were swinging clubs, real Americans were struggling to pay bills, to keep jobs, to keep their homes. But sure, go ahead, tell us about unity." He turned slightly toward Obama, still smiling. "Leadership isn't about how you sound when you talk. It's about what you do when no one's clapping. And from what I've seen, you did a lot of talking, and a lot of golfing." Obama stayed still, his expression unchanged. It wasn't clear if he was angry, amused, or simply waiting. But that calm, that quiet, only fueled Trump more. "You see," Trump said, pacing his words now, "the media always gave you a free pass. Every mistake, every misstep, they covered it up, called it historic, called it progress. But when I came in, suddenly every move I made was wrong. They said I was unfit. They said I was unqualified. You know what that tells me? It tells me I was doing something right. Some people clapped louder this time, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Barron glanced from his father to Obama, studying the way each man held himself. One fiery, one composed, one loud, one silent. Trump turned back to the audience. People love to talk about style. They say Obama was smooth, he was charming, he was poetic. But let me ask you this. Did smooth speeches stop crime? Did poetry fix the border? Did charm rebuild the factories? No, it didn't, I did, the crowd murmured again. His confidence filled the room like a growing flame. He pointed toward Obama again, not angrily, but with theatrical emphasis. You had your turn. 8 years. The country needed results, and instead we got excuses. And golf. The host stepped forward, clearly trying to steer things back to the topic, but Trump waved him off with a grin. No, let's be honest here, Trump said. We can't talk about leadership without talking about the truth. And the truth is, America doesn't need polished words anymore. It needs tough skin. It needs fighters, not talkers. He turned toward the audience again, spreading his hands. Now I respect the man, okay? I really do. But we all know there's something off. The birth certificate, the records, the mystery. If everything's so honest and transparent, then why keep hiding? The question hung in the air like smoke. Every eye turned back to Obama. Still, he didn't move. His silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. He let Trump keep the floor, keep speaking, keep burning through his own momentum. But while the room buzzed with murmurs and shifting emotions, there was another presence on stage, quiet, unnoticed. Barron Trump sat between his father and Obama, listening intently, absorbing every word. He didn't look nervous or surprised. If anything, he looked curious. The moment had become more than a debate. It was a test of composure, of wit, of control. And though Trump's fire filled the hall, no one expected what was coming next. Because the person who would speak after him wasn't Barack Obama. It was the young man sitting beside him, the one who carried his name but would soon prove he had his own voice. The applause that followed Donald Trump's fiery speech was uneven. Half of the audience clapped in admiration, while the other half sat in silence, uncertain whether to cheer or cringe. The energy in the room was strange, restless and heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Barron Trump sat beside his father, quiet and unreadable. His tall frame and calm face gave him a surprising air of maturity for someone his age. He didn't fidget. He didn't smile. He just watched, first his father, then Barack Obama, who still sat poised and relaxed, as if nothing that had just been said could touch him. Then, almost unexpectedly, the host turned to Barron. Barron, the host said gently, you've grown up in the public eye, surrounded by powerful figures. Do you have any thoughts on what leadership means to your generation? The room hushed instantly. Barron leaned forward slightly, adjusting the microphone with a quiet tap. He glanced at his father, who gave a small nod, the kind that said, go ahead, son. Show them what you've got. Barron took a deep breath before speaking, his voice softer than his father's but clear enough to command attention. Leadership, he began, is about truth. It's about knowing who you are, where you come from, and what you stand for. And I think sometimes people forget that. The simplicity of his words caught everyone off guard. There was no arrogance, no aggression, just a steady tone that hinted at something deeper. He paused, then added, when leaders don't tell the truth about who they are, the people lose trust. And without trust, there's no leadership, just performance. Obama's calm expression didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened slightly. The remark was indirect, but everyone in the room knew who it was aimed at. Barron continued, some people become famous for inspiring speeches. Others become known for making promises that sound beautiful but never happen. And when that happens, it's hard to believe in the system anymore. The words inspiring speeches hung in the air like a whisper aimed straight at Obama. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even Trump seemed slightly surprised at the precision of Barron's tone. Barron kept going, carefully shaping his words like chess moves. I was raised to believe that every leader should be proud of where they come from, proud enough to prove it. If someone says they're from somewhere, or something about them isn't clear, shouldn't they be open about it? Shouldn't they show the truth? A faint wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. The reference was unmistakable now. Barron wasn't mentioning names, but everyone knew. The birth topic that his father had stirred years ago had returned. Only this time it came from a calm, youthful voice that made it sound both new and dangerous. Trump sat back in his chair, smiling faintly. Obama stayed motionless. The silence between them seemed alive. Barron's words grew sharper, though his tone never lost its politeness. People say a piece of paper proved everything years ago. But isn't it strange that even now people still talk about whether it was real? If something is true, it shouldn't keep raising questions unless those questions have reason to exist. A nervous cough echoed from the audience. Cameras caught the flicker of emotion on Obama's face. Not anger, not surprise, but a kind of still focus. He was studying Barron now, not as a child speaking rehearsed lines, but as someone who understood the weight of his words. Barron leaned forward again, his voice quiet, but cutting. The country deserves leaders who are honest, who face questions without hiding behind history or popularity. Because at the end of the day, power means nothing if people can't trust where it came from. The crowd murmured again. The tension in the room had transformed. It wasn't loud anymore, it was suspenseful. The kind of silence that held its breath before a storm. Barron paused as if debating whether to continue. Then, with a calm smile, he added one final line that hit like a knife hidden in velvet. I guess what I'm saying is, the truth doesn't need protecting if it's real. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Even the air felt heavier. The host looked uncertain, trying to move to the next segment, but Trump's satisfied smirk stopped him. Obama still hadn't spoken, though the quiet intensity in his expression made it clear he was ready to. Barron's subtle attack had landed perfectly. He hadn't raised his voice once. He hadn't said Obama's name. But his message had done what his father's couldn't. It made the audience think. It created a kind of shadow of doubt, one that whispered louder than any direct accusation. Trump leaned back, proud, his son's words echoing exactly the tone he'd always admired. Calm confidence wrapped in challenge. To him, it was proof that Barron had learned well. But what Trump didn't see, what few noticed, was the flicker of hesitation in Barron's eyes after he spoke. It wasn't guilt, not quite. It was something else. The awareness of having crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He had just publicly questioned a former president's identity, something even most adults would avoid. And yet he had done it with precision. Obama looked at Barron for a long moment, the way a professor looks at a student who surprises him, not with anger, but with quiet calculation. Then Obama's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. A calm, almost knowing smile, the kind that said, "You've spoken your piece. Now it's my turn." The stage was set. The audience didn't know it yet, but what was about to come would change the entire mood of the night. Obama's response wouldn't just defend his name. It would expose something far deeper than Barron, or even Trump, expected. And for the first time that evening, Barron felt the weight of silence press back at him, stronger, heavier, and impossibly calm. The air felt heavy after Barron's last words. The audience sat in uneasy silence, the echo of, "The truth doesn't need protecting if it's real," still hanging in the air like a challenge. Barack Obama remained still, his hands clasped, his expression unreadable. For a moment he simply looked at Barron, not with anger, not even with irritation, but with a calm that seemed almost too quiet for the chaos around him. Then, with the grace of a man who had faced storms before, Obama leaned toward the microphone. He didn't rush. His tone was soft, but it carried through the room like the low roll of thunder before the rain. "You know," he began, "I've been called a lot of things in my life. A dreamer, a liar, a socialist, and even, according to some, a man who wasn't born where I said I was." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the audience. Obama smiled faintly, that familiar half-smile that carried warmth and sharpness all at once. "I used to get frustrated by it," he continued. "The rumors, the conspiracy theories, the distractions. They were loud. They were constant. But eventually, I realized something. Those distractions only work if you let them." He paused, letting the words sink in. His voice was calm, steady, yet filled with that unmistakable rhythm that had once made crowds listen for hours. "There will always be people," he said, "who try to turn politics into a circus. They wave shiny objects in front of the public, hoping no one looks behind the curtain. But the truth, real truth, doesn't come from carnival barkers or loud voices. It comes from character, from consistency, from what you do when the lights go off. A quiet gasp rippled through the room at the phrase carnival barkers. It wasn't lost on anyone who he was referring to. Obama didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The calm in his tone was sharper than any insult could be. He looked directly at Donald Trump now, though his words remained broad, almost philosophical. I spent years proving things I never should have had to prove. I showed my long-form birth certificate back in 2011, not because I needed to, but because I wanted the country to move forward. I wanted to stop the noise. But here we are again, still talking about the same distractions, still avoiding the real problems that actually affect Americans. The crowd began to murmur, sensing the balance of power shifting. Obama's gaze shifted back to Barron, his tone softening slightly. "You're young, Barron. You've got time to learn that leadership isn't about questioning others' identity to make yourself feel stronger. It's about owning your truth first." He paused, then leaned in just a little closer to the mic. "Tell me something," he said quietly, his words clear and cutting. "Have you ever had your own DNA tested to find out who your real mother is?" The room froze. Every sound, every whisper stopped at once. Barron blinked, his calm expression faltering for the first time that night. The silence stretched so long that even the sound of someone shifting in their chair seemed loud. Obama didn't flinch. He sat there, still calm, still collected, watching Barron process what had just been said. "That's how it feels," Obama said after a pause, his voice soft but heavy with meaning. "That's how it feels when people throw personal questions at you, not to find truth but to humiliate, to distract, to tear down what they can't understand." There was no anger in his voice, only quiet disappointment, the kind that stung worse than shouting ever could. "I've spent my life being questioned by people who think shouting makes them right," Obama went on. "But I learned long ago that calm, true calm, is power. You can throw every accusation, every rumor, every insult at me, and still the truth doesn't shake." The words rolled through the hall like a tide turning. Trump's grin had faded slightly. Barron looked down at his hands, still speechless. Obama exhaled softly, as if to release the tension in the room. "This country," he said, "needs fewer people chasing ghosts and more people chasing solutions. It needs leaders who can look beyond gossip, who can rise above cheap applause, who can face ugly questions with grace instead of fear." He leaned back, his eyes sweeping across the audience. "You see, the thing about distractions," he said, "is that they only matter when you let them steal your focus. And every minute we spend arguing about nonsense is a minute stolen from fixing what's broken: schools, families, jobs, the future we're leaving behind." Then he smiled again, small, calm, and confident. "So if we're going to talk about leadership, let's start there. Let's stop playing games with each other's pasts and start building something worth our children's future." The words hung in the air for several long seconds. The audience, unsure whether to clap, simply sat still, caught between admiration and shock. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that meant everyone was thinking, weighing, reconsidering. Trump shifted in his seat, looking at his son. Barron's expression was blank now, not cold but stunned, as if he had been hit with something far heavier than he expected. Obama's voice came one last time, steady and low. "The truth doesn't need defending when you live it. That's something every leader, young or old, eventually learns." He leaned back, folding his hands once again, as if the moment belonged to him all along. The balance of power in the room had shifted completely. The fiery energy Trump had ignited was gone, replaced by something quieter, more commanding. Obama hadn't raised his voice once, yet somehow every word had landed like a blow. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Because everyone knew what they had just witnessed wasn't just a comeback. It was a masterclass in control. The room still trembled in silence after Obama's last words. His calm voice had pierced through the noise like lightning through fog. But he wasn't done, not yet. He sat forward, his gaze steady, his tone shifting slightly from reflective to razor-sharp. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop. "You know," Obama began, "when I listen to these questions about my past, about where I was born or who I am, I can't help but notice something. The people who shout the loudest about truth often have the most to hide. The audience murmured again. Trump stiffened, his jaw tightening, but Obama didn't look away. His voice stayed smooth, firm, but never cruel. "I've been accused of hiding documents," Obama continued. "But let's talk about what's been hidden on the other side. You say leadership is about honesty? Then let's be honest." A hush spread instantly. Cameras zoomed closer. The crowd leaned in, caught in that fine line between curiosity and disbelief. Obama clasped his hands. "Let's start with family roles," he said slowly. "Because when I was president, I worked with experienced advisors, career experts, and cabinet members chosen for what they knew. But you, Mr. President," his eyes met Trump's, "gave your daughter Ivanka authority that even your vice president didn't fully have. You made her one of the most powerful people in the country, without the people ever voting for her." Trump didn't move, but his face flushed red. The audience whispered in shock, recognizing the risk Obama was taking, calling out the sitting president in front of the nation. "And I remember," Obama continued, his tone still calm, "you once said publicly that if she weren't your daughter, you'd probably date her." A murmur ran through the crowd, louder this time, uncomfortable, uneasy. Obama let it linger. "I didn't believe that when I first heard it," he said, looking genuinely pained. "I thought no way. No father would say something like that. But then I saw the clip myself, and the whole world saw it too. That's not leadership. That's not strength. That's a message to every young person watching that power makes you untouchable, that words don't matter. But they do." Trump tried to interject, but Obama's voice stayed steady, unyielding. "You talk about truth, about transparency, but what about morality? What about decency? These aren't just family jokes, Mr. President. They're reflections of what kind of man you are when the cameras stop rolling." Barron sat frozen beside his father, his earlier confidence now replaced by something quieter, almost fearful. Obama turned slightly, addressing the audience again. "And when people question my integrity, I look at who's doing the questioning. I see a family that has made millions off the presidency, who blurred the lines between business and government like it was a family game. I see headlines about properties, deals, and names that should have never been mixed with public service." A reporter gasped softly, and several audience members whispered to each other. The energy in the room had changed completely. What began as a heated debate had become a reckoning. Obama paused, his eyes softer now, but his tone still piercing. When Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett talked about those uncomfortable connections, the photos, the whispers, the way power seemed to bend inside your circle, people laughed it off. But patterns matter, and what we've seen from your administration, Mr. President, are patterns of people treating power like a family heirloom instead of a public responsibility. Trump's fists clenched on the table, but he said nothing. The quiet between them was more powerful than shouting ever could be. Obama leaned in just slightly. "You say you fight for America, but tell me this. How can you fight for a country when you can't even be honest within your own home?" It was the kind of question that couldn't be answered with a slogan or a smirk. The audience felt it deep and sharp. Even Barron looked down, his expression shadowed with thought. Obama's voice grew gentler, though no less forceful. "This isn't about politics anymore. It's about what kind of example we leave for the next generation, what kind of father we are, what kind of men we choose to be when no one's applauding." He let that sentence breathe. The crowd stayed utterly still. "I may not be perfect," Obama said finally, "but I learned that leadership is measured not by how loudly you can insult someone, but by how quietly you can correct what's wrong, starting with yourself." Trump stared back at him, silent, his confidence flickering. The moment wasn't about power now. It was about pride, about truth, about the weight of words that had finally come full circle. Obama's eyes softened again as he looked at Barron. "And to you," he said calmly. "I hope one day you'll understand that greatness doesn't come from the name you inherit. It comes from the truth you live by. The name on your birth certificate isn't what defines you. Your choices do." Barron swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. For the first time, he seemed not like the confident young challenger who'd taken the stage earlier, but like a son caught between two worlds, one built on power and another on principle. Obama leaned back, his final words carrying through the hall with quiet finality. "So when we talk about truth," he said, "let's remember now it's not something you demand from others. It's something you prove every single day through the way you live." Trump stayed silent. Barron stared ahead, his father's hand resting heavily on his shoulder, though it no longer felt like a gesture of victory. Obama had not shouted. He had not insulted. Yet somehow his calm had dismantled everything that loudness had built. The storm he'd walked into had turned on its head, and when the silence returned, it was his, completely.